Everyone hear us properly?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you for everyone to join us. And so we will begin this Zoom meeting with in this group show with the works of Hessie, Olga Theuriet, and Jessye Wdowin-McGregor. So this show is made in two parts. This is now the second part of the show. The first part was a solo show of Hessie, who Hessie made mostly a work of embroidery. Hessie died in 2017, so she's of course here with her work only. And so the work by Hessie in this second part is work which is a perforated paper which writes the words temps perdu, which means lost time. And so this lost time is the articulation between the two shows. And in this second part, Olga Theuriet and Jessye Wdowin-McGregor have been invited to respond to the work of Hessie. Olga Theuriet chose to respond with work that she already made and which was shown in a previous show, also dedicated to Hessie in the south of France, which is a large piece on the floor. A large piece of embroidery also. And Jessye Wdowin-McGregor made specifically a few works of embroidery that you can see behind Olga Theuriet and me, two of them, three of them. And it's five of them on the wall. And so thank you very much for you to join us, and thank you very much to Olga and Jessye for being part of this kind of adventure and kind of living dialogue, if I can say. And so I would like to ask you as a first question, what is your response? What is your relation to Hessie's work? Because I must say before all that neither of you have met Hessie, so it's only through the work or through catalogs and documents that you were interested in and discovered her work. So what was your relation to, and what was your impulse to respond to Hessie's work? And maybe Olga, if you would like to.
Yes. I discovered the existence of Hessie's work in 1917. Somebody talked to me about her works. I was at this time in a residency in south of France, and this person who talked to me made a relationship between my work during the residency and Hessie's works. And she said to me, you should look at what she does. At this time, Hessie was still alive, but I think she died a few months later. And that's why I never met her, unfortunately. But I started to look closely to her works. And I don't think I've ever been inspired by her work in details. But last year, when I was invited to make a work in the center, in an art center in the south of France, I saw at the same moment a video documentary about Hessie, in which she speaks about her relation to her vision of a pair of socks in a museum in France when she was young. And that pair of socks had been embroidered. And when she saw that, she had a very great emotion. And she says that in the film, she says that this vision determined everything happened next to in her life. And just in the same moment, I had in my room a pair of socks of mine. I think I would embroider sometime, but I didn't know when. So I began to think that the residency should be about socks. And so I wrote a letter and asked some people I knew and the population in the village I would join to give some pair of socks. And when I arrived there, I discovered many, many pairs of socks who had been given, 153 pairs exactly. And during 1 month and a half, I embroidered all of them. And this makes a large piece which is on the floor here. With a very, very large, very, very large quantity of thread. I think there's about 15,000 meters of thread all over the piece. And here it is. So I was very, very glad to think about the starting point, which was on the video of Hessie, and this result, which is totally different to what she saw when she was a young woman, but with a relation somehow.
Jessye, would you like to tell us on your experience, on your relation?
Yes. Yes, thank you. I'm similar to Olga in that I hadn't heard of Hessie or seen her work until just a couple of years ago. I came across some images of her work which were shared by art historian Simon Grant just online, and some of her beautiful embroideries and a little tiny bit about her, and I was really taken by her aesthetic. I loved the way her embroidered lines and compositions seemed to somehow float or dance across the surface of the raw fabrics that she used, and they seemed to somehow shift into different states, sometimes visible, sometimes invisible, organic and loose, and yet controlled and contained within the piece of fabric, and sometimes forming, sometimes dissolving. I found this very captivating, and it seemed to me that even though she was using, her mediums are textiles and embroidery, her work wasn't necessarily speaking about the craft of embroidery or using traditional or sort of more rigid embroidery techniques. Her compositions seemed really unique. And I think it reminded me a little bit of some of my mum's embroideries. Even though they're quite aesthetically different, I think it was the minimal line work that was sort of reminiscent to me, and also reminded me of drawing. And my mum has often made embroideries based on her drawings. In any case, those were the kinds of things that were really compelling for me, and I hadn't seen anything like her work. And from that prompt, I started to have research online to see if I could find a bit more about her and her work. And of course, I came across the gallery website and the wonderful page that's dedicated to Hessie's legacy and her archive. And when I found that there was a catalogue published, I was so keen to see if I could purchase a copy, because I mean, it's just nice to have that and to see images of her work in print rather than online or digitally, because depending on the quality of the image, it's a bit hard. Her work's very subtle, so it's quite hard to see it in detail, to see close up. So having the printed version was kind of the closest thing to seeing the works in person. And yeah, that's where we made contact and sort of crossed paths, and it was such a pleasure to be invited to respond to Hessie's work in this exhibition.
And so you both use embroidery for your works here, but you seem to have a different approach to embroidery. Could you tell us a little about that? Olga?
Yeah, for me it's a little bit special because I embroider with a sewing machine, a very simple machine, which uses two threads in the same time, one thread on the top and another on the back. And this makes some results with a similar aspect on both sides, which is not the case for you, Jessie. If we look at the back of your piece,
yes,
we see something very different, which is very nice too, but it's something different than the part who is shown. And the presence of these two threads is very important for me, because it relates to my mind, and it's something. The work itself is something very close to mechanics, because I have to manage the piece I work on a very short place with geometry very close to a very little place. And for this piece in particular, which is several meters long, it was a real challenge to introduce it into this very small space of the machine, of the sewing machine. And I had all the weight on my knees and progressed with many length of embroidery, which was quite fatigue at the end.
I can imagine. It's even just sewing in on a table, or trying to kind of, when you're pushing material through and it's larger and larger, it's that much harder to manage.
it's a physical challenge and physical performance for me. I had sometimes the idea to document myself while working, because I think it would be interesting to see me in action when I have some difficulties with the sewing machine. But I never did it at this time, but maybe sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, with my work, it's obviously hand sewing, and it has its, I guess, its own sort of challenges in a different way. But I relate to your just the physicality you were talking about, even though mine are much smaller and sort of more manageable in that sense. There's something, I was thinking about this the other day, there's something quite compulsive about the hand sewing. I find that once I get going, it's quite hard to stop. I find that I'm so keen to see the composition evolve and appear, I suppose. And so I find that I just want to keep going. It's quite rhythmic, and but also that when I'm working, I'm tending to have it sort of on my lap, and I'm quite bent over. My body is so sore by the time you do, several hours of work where you haven't moved much and you're in this kind of particular position. So it's that's more about me sort of managing how I make the works. But I do find, you were just saying, Olga, before about the front and the back, and I do we were chatting about this the other day. I do really enjoy the backs of embroideries, the parts that you don't normally see, or you wouldn't normally see the reverse, and I do quite enjoy that. And I enjoy when especially on the works that I've made where they're on a relatively sort of thin calico and cotton, you can sometimes see the ends of the threads, or where the threads kind of connect to each other at the back, kind of showing through from the front. And I quite like that. Sometimes you can see the making in there. But I also like that about your work, Olga, where it's viewable, or from either side, that there's that aspect to it. It's not the same in terms of, I mean, it depends how you want to show it, but you could have front and reverse as well.
When I saw your work for the first time, I was very impressed, and I'm still very impressed by the precision of your work. It's very, very sharp. And I wondered if you needed some special conditions to do it with light, or maybe you wear glasses or something like that. No?
No, I didn't. But I did. I mean, I was tracing out my sort of designs or ideas. So I was tracing them on my studio window here with the sunlight. So I sort of had limited time to kind of get them all down, and that was quite straining in a way. But I think it's there's a kind of preciseness or a attention to detail in the way I work in general. So I think these pieces are particularly quite minimal, but in my other work that I do, when I work with drawing, or the way I compose my collages, or even when I'm making video works, I think there is that kind of consideration about how they're composed. And with the embroideries, I think it took me a while to sort of get into the rhythm of making them. There was a lot of sort of stops and starts, and just remembering, but also learning how to do different things as well. I hadn't done or worked with textiles for quite a long time. I'd done a little bit in my undergraduate art school degree, which I really enjoyed, and I just hadn't revisited it for such a long time until the invitation of this exhibition and to make work. And of course I was thinking about Hessie and her embroidery, and so it was a really nice way to kind of have that muscle memory in my hands, remember how to embroider. But I think it's nice to make room for improvisation at times and to kind of reset the confines of how I'm working, just to kind of open it up again. And even though they are very precise, I guess I did like that sometimes what I had in my head and then even the drawing or whatever I traced out on the calico would sort of, something unexpected would happen, or to take a particular turn that was kind of different to how I imagined, but I really liked that. I guess it's in that transmission from a sort of a drawing or a tracing and then to the embroidery, something kind of changes and happens in between.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when we see Hessie's work, we see the repetition of abstract figures. And I always wonder if she did many sessions to achieve a piece, or if she could make it for hours. It's a really question I'm asking.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. And because some of them, at least from what I can see, there's some that just have the tiniest stitches as well. They're almost barely there, but there's lots of them. And I was wondering, I sort of imagined she was making them in between other things and the other demands on her time and her life with her family. But I was curious too as to how long individual pieces might have taken her to do, and whether she was able to do them in several sittings or it took a long time. Yeah, I'm really interested in that.
There's an expression that she employs is survival resistance life. I think I'm quite concerned by this process. And
survival art.
Yes. The position of resistance is really a thing when I start an embroidery. For example, for this piece, I had many pairs of socks which were at the first time some elements which were not connected between each other. And to realize an element of two socks side by side, it took me maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, maybe just a little bit more, but a short time. But then when I had to connect them to achieve the large piece, I had in my mind something very strong with what we do when we are in sports, for example, endurance. Is it a term? Endurance?
Yes, endurance. Yeah, I know what you mean.
I really feel something like that, and I don't know what it is to embroider, to stitch with the hand very long, like you do, or like Hessie maybe probably did. There's a position in the mind which is probably similar, I think.
Yeah,
in a resistance before being able to think, yes, it's time to begin the big thing.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it's something I noticed in the making of these works was, I think because I made them in a short space of time as well, so I was working quite intensively just on those, and but I really felt how I mean, I think it's partly getting older and not necessarily having the same endurance as well, but I really noticed how sore my body was. I think it was just through the, being kind of in an odd position for a bit too long sometimes when I was working on things. And I really felt it in my back and my neck, and I had to. It was good to then have a little break from making embroidery works, because it was quite hard on my body, I thought, compared to some of the other things I'm doing, where I also might have some issues, but not perhaps in the same way. And I think sometimes with embroidery, at least in my experience, that sometimes you don't know until you've sort of almost finished or partway through something, whether it's working as well. So sometimes you have to put in all of the time and the effort to sort of just start to see it forming. And there were a few things that I made that just didn't quite work, or weren't coming together in a way that I thought. So you sort of then start again, or rework it, and that's kind of. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, excuse me. For both of our works, we engage our bodies to the gesture, and maybe for me, the practice of daily walk outside is a great help, and I think if I didn't have this practice, I should make a sport or something to how to say, to train my body to resist because we engage our bodies a lot, I think. Quietly, yes, but regularly.
Yes, I think so. And I think I didn't notice it, or I bounced back maybe more when I was younger, and I would put in very long hours when I was a student, or any time preparing for an exhibition, just wanting to get the work done, to make the work. But I find that I can't. My body just it does resist that. It tells me that I can't. I need to stop, or I need to have some time. Or it was interesting hearing about your walks, Olga. I'm someone who, I love walking, but I try to every day. I walk either at lunchtime on my lunch break at work, or longer walks on the weekend, just in my local neighborhood. And I'm the same. I find that it's just good to get up from being seated or just working, or also maybe something in the studio isn't working, and it's good to get away and to kind of see the natural world, to see people's gardens, to kind of see the sky and the horizon, and just to be walking. And I find walking for me is also about thinking, and or not even thinking sometimes. It's just a space that kind of gets me out of the routine that I'm in, whether it's at work or whether it's in the studio. So I think it's really it's a big part of how I work, is to have that as well.
Yes. So I thought while you spoke that Hessie, when she began her embroidery, it was in the early 70s, end of the 60s, in fact, and the relation to her time was probably different than what it is now. But do you think there is this same notion that using embroidery to do art now is a kind of engagement? No, engagement is not a good word in English, but engagement in French, which means, or to put it very simply, is it a feminist position to embroider today? What would you say to that, Olga?
Yeah, I would say yes, clearly, but in the details, I think that not only embroidery, but simply to be at work and to assume it is a political position, yes. To have something to carry on our lives and to transmit. That's the point for me.
Yeah, I agree.
It's also associated to a type of a form of language that is a great vehicle for political thing in society.
Yeah, I think so too. I think perhaps today, at least it seems, just even in the past few years, there's more of a acknowledgement, kind of celebration of embroidery and textiles and craft, or mediums that perhaps have been more, traditionally overshadowed or overlooked in terms of output, and often by women as well. There just seems to be, I think there's still an aspect of feminism or a sense of statement about working with these materials and mediums, but perhaps there's less resistance to them, or more of a welcoming of them into gallery spaces, and relooking, or really now acknowledging artists from the time that perhaps weren't celebrated in the same way that they are now being. I mean, of course, sadly, so many have either passed away or, much older now, but they're sort of slowly having their time in terms of visibility. So, but yes, but I think so. I think there's still that connection to feminism and kind of intergenerational knowledge and passing on as well.
I think maybe it's different in your country. I don't know, that young people, children or young people, maybe have a very tiny approach of those things, embroidery and sewing, etc. Personally, I only know one girl who is 19 or 20 years old now, who knows how to make a cloth. It's the only person I know in this age. It makes me in charge of something towards her. I give her many fabrics I have in my collection, and many tools to give her some ideas or some material to work. Because I think it's very important to transmit from the hand to the hand.
Yes.
But in the society in general, I think there's a part of the question which is lost for the next generations, because they are in other practices than ours. I don't know if it's specifically in France or elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell. I think there's, in some ways, I'm seeing, maybe not necessarily young people I know, but I'm seeing it just a kind of an interest in these techniques, and interest in craft, a kind of a little bit of a revitalization. I think maybe that comes from being able to kind of access things online, or to look at different ways of, or how things might have been done, if they're not necessarily it's not coming directly from someone they know or from a family member, perhaps. But sometimes I feel quite hopeful that some of these things are being held onto or kind of embraced by younger people. I mean, I guess I see it a little bit in sometimes in what's coming out of the art schools. I mean, there's of course many different mediums and things that young people or emerging artists are exploring. But I am noticing here, at least in Melbourne, I do see quite a strong interest in craft and in textiles. I think in terms of the kind of the tradition or perhaps learning from someone or learning directly from someone, I'm not sure. I think there's probably real gaps there, or yeah, like you were talking about making clothes. I do sense that there's an interest in that, even from a kind of sustainable or environmental perspective. Younger people, I think, are quite interested in mending and repairing and if not making, but possibly making as well, or wanting to kind of learn those skills that they don't have already or haven't learned from someone.
Yes, but I think that our skills are something in if we abstract a place of art, we can transmit it without fear to people who are not in art at all, but who will receive it very simply. It's a great way to transmit something which is originally an ordinary gesture.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not specific to art.
You're right. Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So for transmission and for political position in the society, it's important.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm not from an art school, so for me it was because I'm self-taught. I think that it's a great opportunity to transmit from me to younger persons, to not to have fear of that.
Yes, I think so, that it's something that anyone can access. It doesn't require, I mean, you can do that, but it doesn't require specialist training or that it's exclusive to a certain type of training, that it's that it is something that is very doable, that people can learn. I think that's so important as well. Just to kind of take.
Yeah, excuse me. I think while you speak, maybe for Hessie it was quite different. I think because she lived in a period when a woman at work was in stronger boundaries than we are now. You and I think.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, there was, I guess, a lot. Yeah, I think you're right about boundaries and limitations around, or expectations around what you had to do as a woman, in addition to having a creative practice or wanting to express yourself as an artist or in whatever form. I mean, I think it's still obviously there's still many things that kind of get in the way of that for women today, but much harder then, I think. And that you can sort of see that kind of generational impact, I think. I even think to my mum's time and when she was growing up, and then when she was someone who was a creative person and trying to find a pathway through that, as well as raising a family and looking after children, and the kind of expectations around that. I think they're still there, but it's shifted a lot from Hessie's generation, I think.
Yes, maybe the present period is more fluid for this question. Feminism is still a question, of course, but
yes,
fluid.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
My second question would be about this notion of temps perdu, lost time. So which is the main somehow the subject, or no? It's something very important in the show, I should say. But at the same time, it's not related to anything. It's the piece by Hessie it's only those letters we've made with holes in the paper, temps perdu, and so we have no further explanation, if I can say. So how do you feel with this temps perdu? How do you react to it, or what's the importance, if ever, in your work, in this show, and in your art in general?
I would say temps perdu is a very difficult point to me saying it in English, because in French we have some specific words that say things that are not translatable. For example, I will give just one example. It's the term in French, we call it jour, which is days in English. So time passes every day. And the specific thing with jour is that this word in French is exactly the same to describe the tiny holes who stay between the threads into a fabric. For example, I imagine when you make your work, you have to count the threads to know at what precise place you will pin your needle, and at what specific place the thread you embroider will be situated.
Yes.
And this point is called jour. It's the same word to say day. So in this
that's so interesting.
It's very, very difficult for me to express this idea in English, because it doesn't exist in English. But I would like to say something in relation with the work of Hessie, Temps perdu. This work doesn't have threads, but we see the hole. And this hole is named in French jour, specifically for fabric, not specifically with cardboard or paper, but it exists also in architecture. In a building, you have jour to express some places where the sun will pass through the building, for example. It's the place of light, of circulation of light is called jour, or where you have, if we use it also for the mind, when we think of something, in French, we say sous un nouveau jour, as to say under a new day, which means nothing in English, but it means for us a special lightening of the spirit of the idea we have. So this term, which expresses time, jour, in the form of everyday passes, and it's called jour. I think it's very, very important in my work in general, and I make a relationship between this and what I see of the work of Hessie, Temps perdu. And in literature, also Marcel Proust, la recherche du temps perdu, le temps retrouvé, something. A few people have asked me about this during the time of this show. They were questioned by the title of the show and asked me to know what I thought about Temps perdu from Marcel Proust, but I did not read it, so I don't say.
Yes. It's so interesting to hear that what so much that's completely lost, or there's no, that equivalent translation. It just kind of goes to show what's missing, or all the kind of the richness or the subtlety that gets lost in that when there's no equivalent, or an expression that there's no equivalent in another language. And I think for me, I was I hadn't seen an image of the work before until Arnaud sent me the photo of the work and sort of described the basis for the exhibition. And I thought that the artwork's kind of proposition was really evocative to me. It's obviously if we don't have additional information, it's quite open to interpretation. And I thought about, or to me, it suggested the idea of that art comes into being through time lost. And when I was reflecting on that idea, I was thinking about how, for me personally, it's not meaning or expressing time that's stolen or taken away, but time that's given to the creative act or the creative process, or space that's also made for thinking and ruminating and daydreaming, or the kinds of things that we aren't always able to give time to or value in the same way in our kind of everyday lives. And I also was thinking a little bit about, or more and more I've been thinking about not having enough time, it feels like, for the art making. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to squeeze it in around my day job and making a living. And the other component to the ideas I had when I was making the works for the exhibition was thinking about embroidery and time. And even though this particular work of Hessie's it isn't an embroidery, and as we were Olga and Arnaud and I were saying yesterday when we were talking, that it was possibly the least time-consuming work of hers that she might have made. But I was thinking about how embroidery is really imbued with time. I feel like when I'm hand sewing, it's a very time-consuming process, and I feel like I'm kind of lost in time, but also maybe that time is a little bit suspended when I'm making as well, because of that that rhythm and that repetition. It's almost a little bit trance-like when I'm making, and yeah, hard to stop. So, but in any case, I was thinking about the idea of sewing time, and that was in the sewing itself, the time it took to make it, but also I was using kind of visual cues or symbols like the clock or the parts of the clock in the embroidery themselves, and that was sort of very loose thought process, but that's what came to my mind when I was sort of presented with the proposal of responding to this piece of Hessie's.
Maybe we could say that loss of time is general in the arts, not specific to our works.
Yes.
And it's a very important point to manage with lost time when we make art, when we make poetry or dance or anything, or simply walking outside.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yes, it seems to me that temps perdu, when it's heard at first, I don't know if it's the same in English, but it seems to be negative. When you see temps perdu, it seems that it's something you want to go away from it. But at the same time, when you think about it, it opens to so many fields and so many space. But there is this kind of two moments when this first reaction seems to be it's like death. It frightens somehow, but at the same time there is so much into it, and so that's what I wanted to say.
Yes, you're right. It's a
Yes.
language problem. I think it's really connected to language only, because when we talk about loss of something, of anything, or when we talk also about nothing, the thing nothing, people hear often something negative, which I don't think is the only way to receive it. And it's, for me, it's more affirmative things than negative things.
I think the same for me. That's sort of how I interpret it as well. It could have that kind of negative connotation, that's time that can't be regained or is gone or wasted. But I saw it, or the way I was thinking about it, especially with whether it's through creating or the creative process or some other aspect of your life, it's time that's gifted, I suppose, that it's not lost. But I think you were saying yesterday, Olga, I think about that I'm not sure if it was an expression but in France, about the idea of trying to get time back, or like that there is a sense that it can be regained in some way.
Yes.
When there's time lost. I thought that was quite interesting when you were telling me that.
Yes, that was connected to the idea of a souvenir, or reminding something from the past. And I think it's general in art. When we are in a creation process, we often make references in our intimacy with something we have since a long time. Souvenir of our childhood, or maybe even some gesture we have since a long time. I don't believe so much in French temps retrouvé, but I believe very, very much in time for nothing. sayings in an affirmative sense.
Which is different from the no time.
Yes. Time for nothing is not negative. It's an affirmation of nothing as a thing. And I would say for nothing, or maybe with nothing, which means that nothing is really a thing.
And does that connect to your walks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because the fact of walking is with no artistic purpose, no special gesture during this time. Intentionally, there is no intention. But I imagine that if someone observes me every day, maybe this person will have an idea of what I'm doing. But for me, there's no intention. And when I speak about this in public or in a close relationship, I always feel that I have to justify myself, which nothing is really a thing. And it's not intuitively, it's not simple to somebody to understand that at the first time. But after a few minutes, it's very clear.
Yeah.
But I think we have to justify permanently certain questions.
Yes. Yeah. I guess the way sometimes our societies work, or the way we're taught that you can't just do nothing, or if you're wasting time, or we should be efficient, or that's kind of programmed in sometimes, or it's sort of not valued for because of how we run our days and what's expected of us. I guess there's that sense of having to justify that, and that even comes just sometimes in general about art practice, even as to why you do it, or I think that's kind of bound up a little bit.
Yes, it's not understood at first sight. We have to spend a few minutes to explain.
So I think someone came in and okay. Would you like to sit there? Don't worry. Sorry about this. Diana, tu veux prendre un siège aussi? Il reste un siège, hein, si tu veux. So perhaps it's a good moment to ask if someone would like to say something, either here or through the computer.
About Temps perdu, it's interesting. I see it very negatively. But I think that my mother had a special relationship to time, and that it was not obvious for her moments to create, And time lost for me is very negative. I can't see it, something positive. Yes, it's like this last time during which I didn't find time to work or, you know, to practice or, you know, to express myself.
Would you say that for Hessie, your mother, was temps perdu provocative?
Yes, yes,
expression?
exactly. Yes, I would rather see that.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion.
Maybe it's related to the times, the 70s.
Yes, also, yes, yes. They also were, you know, like you said, engagements with family to raise, etc., etc. And the idea that it was difficult for her to, yes, to find some space and you know, to create. I think you can feel it also in her work. This, you know, this constraints and the fact that she didn't have all day long, you know, to work, which was the case. Yes.
But for the message of her work in society, she used it maybe like a tool to express something against capitalism, for example.
Not that sure. I'm not that sure.
Because in the 70s, these questions were really
strong.
strong.
My parents were rather in the left side. And they were against capitalism. Yes, but I'm not sure that art is a kind of way of expressing that. I'm really doubtful. I find it more complicated. But to me, it's like, yes, it's like a statement. Like, yes, that's my opinion.
But I agree about the statement because Hessie made other perforated works with a single word, which from memory, there is the word silence, there is the word beau temps, which is nice weather if you want to translate. There is the word also trait de union, which is hyphen if you translate it. And so neither of them has any connection of feeling or atmosphere, or it's statement. I would say it's. So you say that there is something very negative in it. But,
but negative. I mean, like yes, she was saying something that yes, it's
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of the observation you made yesterday, Olga, when we were chatting about the just even the way the letters of the second word are kind of squashed up. She's running out of space, or she's kind of constrained or kind of cramped on the piece of paper that she's got, and that very much might have been intentional, but it was quite I thought that was a really interesting observation, that she'd almost run out of room, and you get the sense in relation to the conditions that she was working under, and with 5 children and a well-known artist husband, that she was making and sort of persisting amongst that, but there wasn't a lot of time and space for her and for her making, I think.
I'll say something. I'll say something.
Yes, Betty.
Yeah, I was thinking how maybe 30 years ago, everything shifted when clothing became so cheap. And before that, clothing was relatively expensive. And even today, it's largely the woman's responsibility to supply and take care of clothing. And so it was an act of resistance for Hessie to be not darning socks, to be creating work. And this relates to time. Olga, you and I once had a discussion about chairs and our family history of chairs. because my grandmother on the one side had a little chair with no arms, and her husband had a big armchair because he came home from work and had to rest, whereas she had to stay busy. She was serving her family. So in that chair, I'm sure she was knitting. In that time she could sit down, she was knitting or sewing or mending. My other grandmother had a little stool that she perched in the kitchen. She didn't even sit at the table. She was always serving. So I think women both used sewing to fill up the little spaces of time so they could be productive. But also, I'm sure it was a kind of meditative barrier. Like, don't bother me. I'm accounting for myself. I'm serving. So I think how the body relates to this as a performance and how it links to time. I love the way you talked about endurance. And again, just to go farther afield, in the 70s, there was a lot of performance art about endurance, but it tended to be very macho. I'm thinking Richard Serra, hand grabbing lead, how long can you do this? Or Bruce Nauman, but it was very macho. So the woman's endurance wasn't even noticed, really. It wasn't observed. But this idea of women having to be at work all the time and using needlework as a way of resting, but also appearing to be in your place is very provocative in relation to what you're doing. And your time.
I also have something with an artist, I think it's German, Rencontre, who screams in the landscape. He screams for time and time and time, always scream, and always it's again a man, and it's very, very interesting what you say about it.
In other words, I think it is very linked to a kind of women's work. And how women are expected to fill their time.
Yes, yeah. And maybe in some ways also, I was just thinking about Hessie and her work, and perhaps it was something that she could also do that potentially wasn't painting, or it wasn't a sort of more traditional or obvious form of art making, but allowed her to kind of work away at something that wasn't necessarily questioned or, I don't know, perhaps examined in the same way had she been trying to work in a studio and producing works like her husband. Maybe it also allowed for that in some ways, and using everyday materials and materials she had to hand and producing. But I thought that was really interesting what you say about this sense of always being busy, always being active, and looking after their family. That was just, and still today, I think, isn't recognized enough as a form of labor that comes into being a woman, but particularly in those times. And so interesting about the uncomfortable chair and the comfortable chair. Just very
allow the arms to move. Because
yeah. It's very interesting.
But I was wondering if it, in a way, if Hessie was sort of flipping that kind of in-between moments that women could sit down and take up some needlework into an act of resistance. By making art out of that instead of whatever, mending or thank you.
I think so.
Impeccable de quelque chose. I think the talk opened to so many questions that none arise for the moment, but I think there is plenty of food for thoughts in this meeting, and so perhaps we can say goodbye and hopefully you can see images of the show on the website of the gallery. I think that's important for the persons who did not see the works, and so thank you very much for being from different parts of the world, which is also meaning of something in this exhibition. And so, I would say, vous voulez dire quelque chose, Olga?
Thank you.
No, thank you. So thank you, Jessie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Many thanks to Olga, to Jessie, and to Arnaud for this meeting. Thank you very much.
Merci, Katerina.
Thank you very much.
Merci.
So, goodbye, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Hopefully it will be recorded, so it's possible to see it again.
That would be great.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.